I'm joined by Expenditure Secretary Manoj Govil and Chief Economic Advisor V. Anantha Nageswaran. Welcome to NDTV Profit, sir. I'd like to start with Mr. Govil. Sir, capex allocation, if you see the target, it falls flat, and we have seen the estimates for FY25. It's been revised downwards. If we talk about the estimation for the FY26, it's not it's showing somewhere stagnancy. Do you somewhere indicating that now this is the time private capex should happen and more participation from the private sector?
So that is correct. So we want more private participation. That part is correct. Now, as regards the whether the capex is stagnant or not, last year the capex was around 9.49 lakh crores. This year the revised estimate is putting it at 10.12 lakh crores, which is around 7% growth. Next year we propose a budget estimate of 11.21 lakh crores, which is around 10% growth. So that is on the capex which is done entirely by Government of India. If you also include the capex which is done by the state governments based on the grants that the Government of India gives, that is now reaching around 15.5 lakh crores. And as compared to the RE of this year, there is a 17% increase there. So, which is a substantial increase. So I do not agree with the proposition that capex is not being emphasized. I think it is being emphasized, of course, within the overall limits of the fiscal prudence and the path that the finance minister had announced in 21-22 budget. Within that, the capex is being prioritized.
Sir, coming to you. Most of your suggestion, I think it's imprinted in the budget, particularly in terms of agriculture, deregulation. How you think the budget is? What's your take on the budget, sir?
I mean, you actually answered it yourself. Many of the ideas that we discussed and explored in the economic survey have taken shape in the budget in the form of concrete proposals, whether it is the emphasis on deregulation, looking at the regulatory agencies themselves, or as you said, focus on agriculture, raising the threshold limits on MSME, and also putting purchasing power back in the hands of the public in urban India, etc. So the budget gives us a lot of confidence that the growth estimate range that we projected in the economic survey will now have a much higher chance of being met, particularly towards the higher end of the range rather than towards the lower end of the range. So in that sense, I think the budget has played its part as a transformative one from the point of view of changing the people's mindset. That's very important. And I think it is definitely has, it's not a business as usual budget. It kind of is pointing to certain important transformation, not just with respect to the tax cut or for that matter deregulation, but look at the emphasis being given in areas like renewable energy, creating national capacities on battery storage, grid scale batteries, etc. And a lot of emphasis being given on agriculture, making them climate resistant, encouraging farmers to do crop diversification, etc. So I think it's really a budget that augments the internal capacities as we mentioned in the economic survey yesterday. So I think the budget is a very, very important step towards boosting the medium-term growth potential of the Indian economy.
And indeed, it has taken account a lot of such suggestions, and it's clearly reflecting in the budget document. So, Mr. Govil, on the point that even the rail and infra, if you see the allocations are stagnant, what is the reason behind that?
No, so rail and the infra, especially on the road sector, are one of the two of the largest areas that we have been funding from central government. And both of them have more than 2.5 lakh crores, both they will spend this year as well as the next year. So I don't see that any stagnancy there. It's basically the requirement which is being funded. But one additional point which I'll bring to your notice is that it's not only the central government which does the capex, it's also the state governments. Okay. And a lot of money is now flowing to the state government. In fact, it is a record of 25.6 lakh crores. Another way to put it is that as compared to the RE, The next year's B shows a 11% increase in the money which is going to the state governments, as against the 7% increase that we have seen in the union budget from the RE as compared to the B. So states are a big partner, and there are various schemes to promote capital expenditure, and we are doing so from the union government. We are encouraging the states to take a major role in doing so.
Also, you spoke on the fiscal prudence, which is of course very crucial. But in the budget per se, we are not seeing any growth there, and it's a kind of muted growth when it comes to food and fertilizers. Any specific reason for that, sir?
So food and fertilizer, most of the budget is based on the subsidy requirement for those sectors. And it is difficult to assess exactly what the requirements would be, but based on certain estimates, the requirements are being put. In fact, the requirements on subsidy for food and fertilizer and other areas have been slightly, essentially the same over the last couple of years. They have gone down from around 7 lakh crores to around 4.3 lakh crores this year. As and when more is required from either the food sector or the fertilizer sector, or even, for example, for petroleum sector, that will be provided.
Mr. Nageswaran, on the fiscal glide path, particularly, the government said that from FY26 onwards, there will be debt to GDP ratio. That will be the main factor to be considered while deciding the fiscal glide path. Your take on that, sir, and how we are moving towards it?
Look, I mean, a focus on debt to GDP doesn't necessarily mean that deficit to GDP does not matter. In fact, debt to GDP usually can be brought down even with a higher deficit to GDP ratio only by a country running a higher inflation rate, and that is already circumscribed by the fact that we have an inflation targeting framework. Therefore, both the focus on debt to GDP ratio and deficit to GDP ratio are two sides of the same coin. It's just that a rigid path to a particular number by 2030, etc., with respect to the fiscal deficit will to some extent restrict the degrees of freedom that the government may need, considering the fact, as the economic survey put it yesterday, considering the fact that global economic uncertainty is very high, and then there is a need to respond. So therefore, I don't think the emphasis on bringing down the debt to GDP ratio year after year is some sort of a dilution of commitment to fiscal pathway that is necessary to keep the overall fiscal situation of the country on a sustainable path. So it is both are, as I said, both are two sides of the same coin.
Just wanted to understand from you also, sir, like how you think that this will help in a long run, with this tax to GDP ratio and tax to debt ratio, how this will help if you factoring in the fiscal glide path?
So if you are talking about the fiscal deficit as a parameter for fiscal consolidation, let's take you back a few years back before COVID. We were in a comfortable position. We were improving on the fiscal deficit, but suddenly the COVID crisis came in, and at that time we had the fiscal buffers, fiscal resilience to be able to increase the fiscal deficit from 4.6% the previous year to 9.2%. Now, having reached 9.2%, obviously that is not sustainable. We have to come up to a path which is sustainable. And at that time, the finance minister had announced that we will go down from 9.2 to less than 4.5. And we are pleased that the government has presented a budget in the parliament which shows the next year's fiscal deficit as 4.4. So in my opinion, it is also building fiscal buffers for any future crisis wherein suddenly we might need to increase the spending. And as the CEA just pointed out, that even the path that we have chosen for fiscal consolidation in the future allows us that flexibility rather than putting it as a specific number. So I think it is very important that, especially in an uncertain world, when there is a possibility of global headwinds, which has been also pointed out in the economic survey, that we do have sufficient fiscal buffers with us so as to become more robust.
But do you think that budget has addressed this global headwinds, external headwinds part in the measures announced today?
Undoubtedly. I mean, the one of the headwinds we spoke about was the dependence on external sources for our energy transition. We spoke about the importance of nurturing the Mittelstand, which is the SME sector, and how agriculture can be the sector of the future, etc. You look at the budget proposals, all these issues have been addressed. And that is why I said earlier in one of your questions that the budget does indeed contribute to boosting the medium-term growth potential of the economy, and that is not possible for me to say that if the budget had not addressed the global situation by strengthening the domestic levers of economic growth, undoubtedly.
Last question to you, sir, on the state special package, and Bihar has a clear mention in the budget speech. Could you please elaborate a bit on the allocation, because it's in the range from aviation to food processing. What is the allocation there, and what will be the total revenue foregone in that? It's a kind of impetus which has been announced for Bihar.
For the state of Bihar, certain specific steps have been announced. Some of them, the budget provision has been provided. For example, for Makhana board, some budget provision has been provided. For others, the scheme is still to be worked out. But more generally, as far as the states are concerned, I mentioned that 25.6 lakh crores is the overall envelope that the government of India, either from the state, the tax devolution, the finance commission grants and other grants, that is going to the states, of which one specific scheme, that is the special assistance for capex, it's an incentive scheme, that has been put at 1.5 lakh crores. And we still have to frame the guidelines for the next year. But for this year, I can tell you that 1.5 lakh crores had two parts. One is the untied part, which was given to all states based on their 15 Finance Commission ratios or entitlements. And the tied part was tied to certain reforms that the states were supposed to do. And we are happy to say that the offtake this year, January end figures I have, is about the same as for the entire 12 months of the previous financial year. So we hope that the offtake in that scheme also this year will be much better than what it was last year.
Do we see similar sort of impetus to other states as well? Some states have been demanding, I don't want to take the name of states, but some states have been demanding on the impetus.
So if you are speaking about the scheme for incentives to the states, under that scheme, it's by and large reform based. And a part of it, of course, is based on the 15th Finance Commission formula. So most states do get it. In fact, when the finance minister took a meeting and requested the state government finance ministers to opine on the budget, give their suggestions, many finance ministers from the state government praised the scheme and said that this scheme should continue and even the outlay should increase. So that was taken into consideration while framing the budget proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Govil and Nageswaran, sir, for taking out time for us. Thank you very much.